this is a relatively new phenomenon, the Mandela effect, and the social consciousness as a buzzword, as part of the social lexicon. I realize. Well, actually, I shouldn't make this assumption. Has it been added to the Oxford Dictionary or Merriam-Webster's? Is it an official word now?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of either. And I think I need to interject here a little bit. It's the Mandela effect itself as being what it's called is a newer concept. The phenomenon itself has been around to my knowledge, at least until 2001, which is when I first heard about it on Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell, where it was May 31st, 2001. There was a caller that called in talking about how he had remembered Nelson Mandela having died in prison, to which other callers also called in and said they remembered the same thing, which Art Bell himself said he remembered. So the phenomenon itself, and that's what got me started on researching it. So, I mean, the phenomenon itself dates back much farther than the term being coined.
Yeah, my first experience with it, I mean, before it had a name, was, and I'm sure it's as old as time in a way, but I know for a fact that it happened was in 1987. When I was dealing with the VW, my friend was rebuilding his bug, and he broke the on the hood. He actually broke that logo that goes on it when he's painting it. He took it off to paint the hood. And he went and tried to order a new one, and it was a 1961 Beetle. And so I took him to the store because he was working on his car, obviously, to order it. And it came in a couple weeks later, and it had that gap. And he's like, no, not that one, the one from the 1961 Beetle. And he gave it back, and he got the right one. He actually got it in 1987. And I never thought anything of it then. And then another incident happened also in 1987 with the Good Witch Glenda's dress being different. My friend, who happened to be my other friend's sister at the time, coincidentally, brought that up. And I was like, yeah, it's on VHS. I'll check it out some other time. And sure enough, yeah, I remember a totally different dress than this pink dress. It was a green aquamarine kind of thing with gold flecks and everything. And yeah, absolutely. And then 1992, I actually had the Bernstein Bears. I was reading my nephew's book. He was like 2 years old at the time. They pulled it out to move or something, and I saw that. And I actually got affected. I got that strange deja vu sensation. And so that's the earliest I've known of it.
Let me just prep the listeners here, and I'm sure many more people will listen to this because it'll be left on the Reddit thread as a podcast of sorts. And so over time, thousands and thousands of people are going to listen to this. So I want to give a better introduction to our two debaters here today, folks. So I'll start with Kyle because you just finished talking Epic. Kyle, would you consider yourself a debunker of sorts? Like, where do you come into the consciousness realm? Is it just the Mandela effect you have problems with, or? And I'm not saying that in a sarcastic or demeaning way. I'm not taking any.
I get it. I don't know that I would be what you would call a debunker. I go into everything with an open mind, and I look at all the evidence for what it truly is, not what I want it to be or what I think it should be. I take everything in and I analyze it for what it is. And then I simply follow the trail of evidence where it leads. So I'm not looking to debunk anything. I'm not looking to prove anything. I'm just trying to see where the evidence actually goes and then make the most probable conclusion based on that.
And Epic, how would you do? I know Epic. Thank you very much, Kyle. I know Epic, and I would describe him as a rational mystic in the Ram Dass tradition with heavy military training.
That's probably accurate. Yeah. I'm an ex-submarine guy. I was in submarines, and then I had a spook job basically where I hunted Russian submarines as a civilian for 4 years or so. And then I'm in the engineering department now of a utility, but I basically. I've always been interested in the paranormal Epic. And the unusual and unexplained.
Would you consider yourself susceptible to flaky stuff? You believe in ghosts, Epic?
I believe in the spirit realm, yeah.
See, I'm trying to be a neutral, detached, and objective moderator. I actually believe in ghosts, but I make people who might sound flaky in the way I say it. But I'm trying to be fair, and I'm trying to be level here. So You're kind of the kind of mind that I would not be surprised is attracted to the Mandela effect as a point of contemplation and rational thought for inspiration. Epic. Would you say that that's fair?
Well, it's definitely fair. I've always
Kyle?
been interested in those kind of unusual things.
And Kyle, you're just kind of coming at it because it's gathered great momentum, and you're saying these people have lost their rational balance. I'm going to try and assist them.
No, I mean, I have a definite interest in things like that, anything paranormal like that. It doesn't necessarily that I believe in it, but it doesn't mean I don't believe it either. Like I would love to have to find actual evidence that would prove me wrong. There just hasn't been any. And that's, if I'm not saying I'm absolutely right. There's every chance that I could be wrong. I've just not seen any proof that that's the case.
Okay.
Following the evidence where it goes. I believe ghosts could exist. I don't know that that's been proven, but I don't say they don't exist. But, like everyone, I want to see the evidence that they do. The proof that they do, not necessarily evidence. Evidence and proof are different.
Right. So I have a high tolerance for the weird myself. Epic can testify to that.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a book called Stardust Ranch, The Incredible True Story, about one of these ranches on this ley line that goes through Utah and Arizona, where there's all these sort of weird phenomenons. And in the course of writing that book, and I was agnostic to the topic. I was just being a cheesy writer looking for something that might sell a few thousand copies on Amazon. And a mutual friend introduced me to the ranch owner. But it ended up changing my life in a fairly significant way, because I met all kinds of people. Like just a year ago, I had the Harvard Medical School calling me to ask to do an experiment at the ranch. They couldn't get a hold of the ranch owner, John Edmonds. So a lot of people would find me on LinkedIn and reach out. And this went from physics institutes to Harvard Medical School. I was a little taken aback by how many people are actually interested in this stuff in the rational world. So there's our context. There's the three weird people, the moderator and the two debaters, folks. And then I think now is a good time to sort of just get into the individual perceptions of what the Mandela effect is, okay? So in this regard, Epic, because you are the moderator and you are sort of king of the hill here, I'm going to let you go first. Are you comfortable with that?
Sure. So
I'm going to give you, take as much time as you want, up to, I'd say, even 5 minutes, okay? Now, Kyle, I know that's long, but if you can just keep like a notebook open on your desktop and mute and write your questions as he speaks and try not to interrupt him. Although he could be done quickly. Who knows?
Oh, yep. I have no problem with that. He take all the time he needs.
yeah,
Okay,
I'm going to ask the first question will be is to represent the non-standard side. So the standard side, as I understand it pretty well, is that everything is explainable as a psychological phenomena or a glitch in memory, or something that's misremembered, a false memory, implanted memory, those kind of things. That they're oftentimes confabulation. It could be things that are reinforced through positive reinforcement of a fad or something, or maybe a parody seen on TV in The Simpsons or something that's wrong, but people remember it as the actual thing. And so those exist as an explanation for some things. But I'm going to ask specifically one that came up the last 2 weeks in this live talk, actually, and I'll let Kyle answer. We're going to talk about the cornucopia in the Fruit of the Loom logo. So we had a guest last week from Croatia, and his backstory was that during the Balkans War in the 90s, they received some gifts from basically NATO nations and things, some donations to help the people out that were victims of that horrible war. And among those things, he received these T-shirts, or at least one T-shirt that had this logo on it. And he learned what a cornucopia was from that logo, from this Fruit of the Loom logo. And the week before, we had another guest. She was from Germany. And during her school days, she had a school uniform, and she used to look at her school uniform every day and memorize this cornucopia on the Fruit of the Loom logo. And so many people claim that they learned what a cornucopia was from that logo, yet that logo has never had a cornucopia on it. So how can it be and these are people from all over the world. This isn't just America. It's not an American phenomena. This is a girl from Germany and a guy from Croatia, and they're among thousands of experiences. How can it be a false memory when the way that they learned what a cornucopia was in the first place was from this non-existent logo?
Yeah. Okay. And it's a good example. And I'm familiar with that example. And it's the first thing you have to consider is that these people that they say this, it's always word of mouth, and they can never produce what they're talking about. They say they have this clothing, but they can never produce it. They can't actually show that label. And no label has ever been found that actually has the cornucopia on it. There have been a couple of them that have been reproduced or edited that actually show that label, but we're talking only 30 some years. Surely some clothing would have survived 30, 35 years that would have that label on it, and it just does not exist. So you have to, you can't just take things by word of mouth. When they make a claim, somebody makes a claim like that, you got to be able to back it up with something. And there's just nothing to back it up other than word of mouth. And an interesting thing about this, this particular fact that I've done some digging into, and some people they maybe even have mentioned it on actually, I think I've seen it or had somebody mention about back in the 70s, Fruit of the Loom put out a trademark request for a logo for a laundry detergent. In that, the document from the Patent and Trademark Office, it has listed on it cornucopia. And many people look at this as, okay, this is proof that label had a cornucopia. No, what that is the code, the description of the search code that the Patent and Trademark Office used as the categories they searched for similar logos. They also searched under grapes, apples, berries, and containers of fruit. And so people will look at that. Here's the smoking gun proof, and it just isn't proof. It's when you look into that a little bit more, you can find out. Well, okay, here's how you explain this. This is why this is, So, but yeah, I think the thing is nobody can ever back up these claims, and that doesn't mean discount their claims, but you have to kind of take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. Okay, are they saying this?
So
can they prove it?
I'm going to bounce this back to Epic. First, answer it within the container of this particular example, Epic, and then you can elasticize it to the general concept of a lack of physical proof for these Mandela Effect claims. Go ahead, Mr. Epic.
Yes, that brings us to the non-standard argument. So the standard argument is that it requires proof, right? And the proof doesn't exist. And that's why these non-standard theories come into play and how they come into play. So you get things like the idea of parallel dimensions, parallel worlds, altering reality, these kind of things that are exotic and far-fetched because evidence doesn't exist. Yet the evidence does exist in the minds of the people, in the memories of the people who experienced it. So in the case of this cornucopia, so many people learned what it was from that logo. In fact, several people have even said they thought it was a seashell or things like that. I remember learning of it as a kid from this kind of like seashell looking thing at the time. For us in America, it's easy to say, well, we have Thanksgiving and it's a popular theme and there's cornucopias with fruit all the time and the school board, in the room and things like that come around the holidays. But these people we're talking about from Germany and from Croatia and all over the world, they don't have that. I mean, right. their only association with the cornucopia other than that would be something like Greek mythology. Yeah. The Horn of Plenty, that kind of thing. They're directly related to that. So that's what brings in these non-standard arguments, which is what we're going to get into, obviously.
Yep. If I can rebut you real quick, just real quick. The one thing too to consider is that the logo for Fruit of Loom has changed. And back, I don't know how many years ago, but there was a logo that had like brown leaves behind the fruit, which could possibly be mistaken for a cornucopia or other container or something. And then also when you talk about the non-standard explanation, you're trying to prove an unproven with another unproven, like let's say multiple reality or something, which there's theories for, but they can't test those theories to see if they even exist or not. So you're now trying to prove one unproven with another unproven. And that just, you you just can't do that. It's a good hypothetical and it's a possibility, but it just doesn't hold as much weight when you can't prove either one.
Yeah. Kind of a scientific chain of custody there. Epic.
Yes.
Yeah, it's all because you can't prove a memory. The memory exists in the mind of the person who has it. So there's really no way to prove a memory. Right?
Well, actually,
there may be in the future.
You can. Okay, I have to interject here and be objective. If I have a memory of burying a silver pendant in the backyard of my family home, and I go back now at my present age of 56 and dig it up, and the silver pendant is there, I've proved my memory.
Mm-hmm.
You can prove a memory, Epic. That is patently false. I'm not going to allow that sentence into this debate.
And that's the thing where, we find it in the Facebook all the time. It says, well, what's to say that your memory's right? Talking to the skeptics, if you will. Well, we can prove it because our memory matches how it is.
But if that pendant wasn't there when you went to go dig it up and you knew it was, then is your memory wrong?
It could be, and we're not, and nobody really says that the memory is wrong. They just point out it could be contaminated, it could be influenced, it could be suggested, it could be, and that's another point of contention that I have from, and I hate the term again, the believers, is that, is, well, you're trying to tell us that we're wrong. No, it says we're trying to tell you that it's possible you could be wrong. There's a difference. We're not saying that it definitely is this. We're saying there's just no evidence for it. So it's possible the memory could be influenced or suggested.
Kyle, do you have a directed question for Epic of your three questions to begin? Because it's my understanding this is 60 minutes and we're at 30 already. So I'm going to move it along.
Yes. My question to him would be is how would you explain that people seem to, for lack of a better word, experience or notice the effect at different times, and the fact that these supposed changes, you can never actually pinpoint exactly when they happened. People will say, well, this happened, in 2012, or no, this happened in 2009. No, it happened in 2016. You can never pinpoint an exact point where if something actually did change, you should be able to tell when it changed.
So to use the non-standard explanations that are often floated here in the subreddit, one of them is the idea of quantum immortality, so that the person is actually dying in one reality, but doesn't die. The seed of consciousness just moves to the next parallel universe, essentially, right? And so the next closest thing, now I know it sounds ridiculous, but this is a non-standard theory, right? So the idea is that when that person moves to the next adjacent parallel dimension or universe, whatever it's called, we'll just call it a parallel world, multiverse, then there's subtle things that are different, just slight things, and they're only different and recognizable to that person because that person's seed of consciousness changed. They went to this next parallel place. So to them, they noticed the change. The people around them don't notice because it didn't happen to them. They're still, it's always been the same to them, right? So in that sense, that's a non-standard, very non-standard explanation, but I have to bring that up because it is floated here. So,
And see, and my question to that would be, okay, so, and I've heard that as well, their consciousness moves from one reality to another or universe or whatever you want to call it. But what happens then to the consciousness of the person that was in that reality? Because they would have, no, because the one that moved would be the one that passed away. Their consciousness would have moved to a different one. But what happened to the one that it moved into, who didn't die, was there all the time? Where did their consciousness go?
Well, you're multidimensional as a being. So basically, the idea here is that you're always multidimensional. There's many versions of us throughout the multiverse, right? And that all that's really happening is the one that we're most directly involved with is the one that we pay attention to. But there's still something very, very similar. One person goes right when you go left, and that's the only real difference. But it sets off a whole different chain of events in that other parallel world. So you don't go to the one where you went left that day and met your future wife. You go to the one where you still went right. And everything else is the same, except you didn't go, walk off the cliff and die. So, I mean, it's like I said, it's an exotic explanation. It's not necessarily one that I favor.
It is.
It's just one that I'm putting out there because it is brought up on the subreddit.
Yep, I get it. And like I said, it's a hard. It's again, it's like trying to prove an unproven with another unproven. It makes a lot of sense, but at the same time, if the unproven is not factual, then it doesn't make any sense.
So let me just cleanse the palate here, like the ginger on the sushi plate. So let me ask a general question. You can both quickly give me your answer. Why do you think fascination with this general idea pool is exploding and has been exploding for about a year or 2 years now? With I think it started in Hollywood with Infinity with Mark Wahlberg, and then you've got Everything Everywhere All at Once, which was quite critically well received, and Doctor Strange and the multi. Why is the multiverse suddenly becoming such a strong part of our lexicon? It's one of the major narratives popping into the collective, at least in the first world right now. I myself live in Central America, and I can assure you it has not yet permeated to the farmers I live with. But in the first world, this is an exploding idea. What is it? Where does it come from? Why is it cresting now? It's almost like a Mandela effect of itself.
Do you want me to go first, or
Sure, please.
Okay.
Please.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is because right now science, they want to prove it, they want to be able to do it, and so they're concentrating efforts on trying to prove things like that. And even there's a lot of theories that aren't proven, but that do make a lot of sense, even though there isn't a whole lot of evidence to hard evidence to back them up. And I think a lot of it is just Hollywood taps into that, and so they'll tailor their movies towards kind of what's going on in current events type thing. And I think the internet has a lot to do with it. I think CERN reactivating the collider has a lot to do with it, because that's another big theory about that CERN is causing it, which I just don't think that holds a lot of weight, but maybe it does. But I think that too can cause people to get more into this, and in Hollywood, and it things spread like wildfire like that. It's funny. But it's happened all throughout history.
Yeah.
I think that this is a case of actually the Mandela Effect community influencing popular culture. It became mainstream in 2018. Before then, it was really the first time anybody brought it up was an episode of Real Time with Bill Maher where Jim Carrey brought it up. That was the first time anybody ever said it out loud. There was an episode of X-Files that had kind of a play on this missing Sinbad Genie movie. It wasn't a Genie movie; it was an Outer Limits episode or something like that. In his case, it's called the episode something, the case of whatever, forehead sweat or something like that. It's a kind of a comedy version of the X-Files it did. And then, so that got some traction in 2017, but really it went mainstream in 2018. Before that, people had to experience it, stumble upon this subreddit or, see it on YouTube video, kind of an obscure channel or something, but it's kind of exploded into popular culture where now people look at lists and they're all aware of what the Mandela Effect is. And I think this is what we're seeing with the popularity of the concept of the multiverse. And it does have a lot to do with the Large Hadron Collider in the sense that not that it's causing it, but that people, they're aware of them creating these singularities and things like that. Literally like a small singlet black hole. And because of that and this kind of potential to render the universe in a way, they're worried about it. There's people who theorize that there's a 1 in a million chance that just turning that thing on at the time might cause a black hole that would destroy the planet. And they did it anyway. It's kind of like when they did the Trinity experiment with the nuclear bomb. So I love science, but man, they do some irresponsible things sometimes. Yeah. And I think people's concern about CERN, no pun intended, that does play into it as well. So and definitely the Marvel universe is super latched onto the idea of the multiverse now.
Yep. And I think you touched on YouTube a little bit too, where there's a lot of YouTube channels that deal with this, and that that gets people going into it, and there's a lot of very well done YouTube channels on it that tackle it with an open mind, and not necessarily a skeptical mind, but they will look at all sides of it.
Yeah. So Epic, let's get back to the 3 questions. Your second question.
My second question is an interesting one, I think, because I think it's the hardest one to answer. How do things that never existed become a shared memory? For example, there was no Sinbad Genie movie. Now you could say it was Kazam or whatever, but they remember details. People remember details of the plot. They remember the people in it. I mean, what they were, the single man and the son and the daughter, and things like or scenes that never happened in a movie. These things that if it never happened in the first place, how can it generate a false image of it to begin with?
Suggestion, power of suggestion. And like in the case of Sinbad, I would kind of differ with you on, people say they can remember the people that were in it, but the only one they can really ever remember that was in it is Sinbad. They can never, there's not a consensus on who the kids were, who the parents were, the other characters. There's not really even a consensus on the plot. There's 3 or 4 different plots that people have thrown out that I've seen that just don't, there's no consensus, which makes you wonder, okay, so why, what's making them, believe this? And then there's also the fact that in the early to mid 90s, Sinbad hosted a block of Sinbad the Sailor movie shows on a Saturday morning, it may have been, where he was dressed up like a pirate, which is very close to what a genie looks like. And that could cause a confabulation or suggest a memory that Sinbad was a genie. And he's actually gone on Twitter with these pictures showing, here, this is probably what you're remembering. I dressed up like this. Then you add to the fact that he also, on College Humor, he himself made a parody video of the Sinbad movie that had nods to, 20 or 30 other Mandela effects in it, all as an April Fool's joke. And I've seen that posted as evidence hundreds of times by people who don't realize what it is.
I have to push back a little bit of this one to reveal something that's important to the conversation. I actually helped write that. So the College Humor skit, the College Humor guys approached me for the dialogue and the skin description. And this post that I wrote in 2016 about the missing Sinbad Genie movie, Lifetime, a user named Harold2K from South Africa, found that photo of Sinbad as a genie on an eBay Hong Kong site. And he tweeted Lifetime while we were on the subreddit doing this, Sinbad on Twitter. And at first he didn't recognize it, didn't know what it was. And then he actually got back to us and said, yeah, it was a TBS special. He remembered after he saw it and thought about it a little more. And the thing about that, it's a great example of how the internet works. That photo did not exist on the internet before that moment. Now you look it up, it's there available right away. But if it were not for Harold2K, the user at the time, finding it on eBay Hong Kong and actually contacting Sinbad about it, it would not exist. Now it's there,
Yep.
But that's how the internet works. When somebody actually puts something on the internet, now it's here. But before that time, in 2016, it didn't exist.
There's another great example of something like that is, and I don't know if I'm sure you've probably heard of it, is there's a Tinkerbell, the Disney intro with Tinkerbell, where supposedly she would wave the wand on the castle, and nobody can seem to find it. Well, in our Facebook group, there's somebody that actually worked for the Disney Corporation, and people need to realize that Disney is basically like an umbrella, and there's hundreds of different companies that all operate under Disney that are part of Disney, but they're technically separate. I mean, like ABC, ESPN, Univista Home Entertainment, Pixar is all Disney, but it's all separate entities. And oftentimes they're not even in communication with each other. And what happened with this intro is it was an intro used on and only used occasionally on like the Sunday night Disney movies they'd have or Disney specials. So the only way that those people would have these intros is if they actually recorded them on VHS and uploaded them to the internet. And people think that anything that's ever existed is on the internet, and it's just not the case. It's not there until somebody puts it there. And then once it's there, it's there. But not everything, you're not going to find everything on the internet because everything's not on the internet yet.
Okay. So let's reprime with a new question. I forget whose turn it is.
It's Kyle's turn.
I had one job.
Well, I do want to follow up on that question though. So we got sidetracked a little bit with the Sinbad movie. I just want to point out that another perhaps better example, because you at least have something you can point to is something can be conflated with in that movie, potentially. But what about something like the Bolton Museum dinosaur that all these people remember seeing and going back to the 60s? and it's never been there. But they can describe the teeth that it had. It had like 3 miscolored teeth. It was right there at the entrance when you walked in the museum, but yet it's never been there. So how do these people get this memory? And they all share this memory. It's a true Mandela effect, maybe one of the earliest ones, and it's documented. Or the missing Thunderbird photo. These are things that how do they have this memory of something that never existed in the first place?
It's hard. And that one I'm not all that familiar with. I don't know that I've researched that one. There's a lot of effects that I haven't been able to research. There's so many of them out there, and but again, I would go back to it could be suggestion. Anything could suggest a memory like that, and most of the time you don't even realize it's happening. It could just be word of mouth. It could just be a simple phrase that somebody says that, oh yeah, I remember that too. I go back to, I want to say it was Elizabeth Loftus did a study, and I think it was actually one of her colleagues did what they called a lost in the mall study, where they convinced people that when they were a kid, they were lost in the mall. And these people were able to vividly recall these memories of something that never happened, down to very little detail. So it's the power of suggestion is way more than what we can understand, and most of the time we don't even realize that it's happening.
Yeah. Next question.
Okay. One of the biggest, I should say one of the most popular explanations that I've heard is time travel, and I kind of want you to explain how would time travel cause the Mandela effect.
Now, for me, I'm taking the position of what I've seen written. So for me personally, it's one of the hardest ones to justify, because it seems to me it would change for everybody. I mean, at least over long term. And the closer you got to the event, so let's say you left in 2035, right, and you came back here. As you got closer to the 0 mark, as you got closer to the day that you left, if you were that one time traveler, right, everything would start coming together to where when you went back to your time in 2035, before you left, everything from that moment on is just from the moment, it's continuous to you. But everything around you is what's changing, right? So how would the people involved even know? Because it's just always been that way to them, right?
Yeah.
So it is a difficult one, but the explanation that I've seen put forward the most is if time travel is possible, because actually Terence McKenna brought this up, so I'll go with that. Terence McKenna's time wave 0 hypothesis, he built these computer programs that all ended in 2012, and he theorized, he drew this Nautilus shell kind of diagram, and what it was, it went from the outside to the inside. The idea being is it got closer to this end date where everything converged at 2012 in his simulation that he ran with this computer. It became like going from the outside rings of this Nautilus shell to the interior, meaning that realities and timelines all compressed and got closer together, and the space between them was closer together until they hit at the center. And at that spot, would be, where they all blended together at the same time. Either the time would end or it would cause a major event, this, collapse of the existing universe and maybe the rebirth of another one. But he started walking that back a little bit over time. But that was his original hypothesis. And people use that one to say, well, that's basically what it was. We were getting closer. The distance between these different timelines became compressed where you could move more freely between them. Yeah. And it was kind of fun, to watch. Terence McKenna is a very interesting guy. I encourage people to look at some of his work.
Oh yeah, he's been at Art Bell shows a lot. And
yeah, he passed away a couple of years ago.
But he did.
And it had nothing to do with the Mayan thing, really. But the reason I brought it up and I wanted to say this was that the time wave 0, the other explanation he gave was that time travel was created in 2012.
Yeah,
which is what people will bring up here. So that's what changed. Is that time travel was invented in 2012.
Yeah, and see here. So my thinking on this is, like you said, somebody went back, let's say from 2022 back in time to a point in the past and changed something. Number one, you'd be able to pinpoint exactly when in time that change happened, because that's when it happened. And number two, anybody that was present in that time would have witnessed the change. Anybody after that would have never noticed the change because it would have never happened to them. It would have always been the way, the new way, and it wouldn't cause some people to remember one way and some people to remember another way, because they all would have experienced it the same way. So it just, now what it could do, and completely theoretically speaking, is, you go back in time and change something, it could create an alternate timeline. And that's a definite possible theory, but that still wouldn't explain how we can transverse between the two. You're trying to take proven unproven with another unproven that depends on another unproven.
Yeah. Point taken. Let's move to the next question, because I want to leave a little bit of time for questions. I saw some hands go up and then go down. I believe you're up, Epic.
Yep.
My back. Yeah. We haven't had a single live talk yet where I haven't lost the connection. I think it's a Reddit server thing, but I caught it pretty quick, I think. So, that unproven idea. So we're on next question, I guess.
Yep.
Yes.
So my last question. So my last question would be, to represent the community here, the idea of flip-flops. For a lot of people, the thing that kept them coming here after they originally saw the Berenstain Bears or something they were interested in, it was just kind of a fun thing to look at, or Chick-fil-A, instead of Chick-fil-A or whatever it might have been, was they witnessed a flip-flop. Most people witnessed the Apollo 13 flip-flop. That's probably the most famous one. And the Back to the Future van was the other one. A lot of people, I actually got to see both of those. I was fortunate enough to actually experience both of those. And it was the Apollo 13 flip-flop that actually kept me here. I came here looking for the Sinbad Genie movie. I found out that didn't exist. I had ordered 2 copies from a video store. I'm really familiar with that movie, right? So I know about it. I can tell you all about it. But that's why I came to start. And then it was Apollo 13 flip-flop. I hadn't joined Reddit yet. I was just reading, I was on the fringe outside reading the posts and things. And this happened in 2016. And sure enough, I was watching it, and it had movieclips.com, all these things. All things I looked at were internet-based. They were all things that were on the internet. So let's put that out there to start with. Yeah. But it was these YouTube channels where they had the preview from the movie where it's, Houston, we have a problem, right? It says that I ran a video store. It's on the poster of the movie. It's on the VHS box. It says, Houston, we have a problem on the box, right? And it's in the scenes, really, you can't mistake it. I mean, we're talking about the movie, not the radio show or actual radio transcripts of the astronauts. We're talking just about that. Yep. So the actual movie. And so I saw it happen to where it was Houston, we've had a problem. The camera angle is different. It wasn't the tight shot of Tom Hanks, face on anymore. Houston, we have a problem. It was Houston, we have a problem, right? Or we've had a problem. Sorry, we've had a problem. And it's just, I think it's shot across Paxton's, from his side. He's coming from the back after the explosion or whatever happens in the back, and then it's it's a totally different camera angle and everything, right? And it's went over the span of actually that post was running for a couple of days, and I was participating, and I had things open at the time, and I watched all these clips that all said it, and during the conversation that was going on in the thread, people were just saying, because there's a BuzzFeed article about it that was misquoted, there's all this stuff. We're going, I guess we just had it wrong. It really does say it this way. It must be true. We're kind of coming to grips in the thread with that's just the way it is. And it changed back. It changed back to Houston, we have a problem, back to the other camera angle. And when it changed, everything changed. All those sites we just looked at, all those YouTube channels, everything changed. And it turned out that it wasn't just me that in this group that I was in that experienced it. It happened before. I wasn't even aware of that. It happened going back to 2015. And it continued to happen through 2018, whole different groups of people. But when we go look at it, because we've already experienced it, right? We'd go to the same things they're trying to link to say, hey, check it out. This is going on right now. And we go look, and no, it's just the same Houston, we have a problem. It's never, nobody's ever experienced this, had it happen to them twice. You know what I mean? Never didn't go back and forth. But so this is something, and this is my question, that it's not a memory thing. It's something we witnessed. It's an eyewitness thing. It's an event. It's not a memory. So how has that become explainable by a misremembered thing?
Perception. We often perceive things different than they actually are. And people will say that, well, perception creates reality. Well, no, if that was the case, then you would not be able to misperceive anything, which happens all the time. And the Apollo 13 movie is a interesting example because that's one of my favorite movies of all time. I've got the VHS, the DVD, the Blu-ray, and I had the VHS ever since it came out. I want to say like 1995. I could be wrong on that, but I know it was right around then. And I watched that movie. If it's on TV, I watch it. That's one of those where if I'm flipping through the channels and that's on, I'm done flipping through the channels. I watch it. I have never seen that line flip-flop. I've never seen it change, let alone change back. It's always been now. And now I'm going to ask you this: what is the actual quote that was said by the astronauts? Not the movie. What is the actual quote that was said by the astronauts?
The one the astronauts actually said on the radio we have
Yes.
is, Houston, we've had a problem.
Yep.
Yeah.
The movie had got it wrong immediately, and NASA has actually adapted the movie quote on some of their websites, and that just goes to show you that the popularity of the movie sometimes can override, what actual historical fact. It people will ask this too all the time, like with the Empire Strikes Back line. Well, how could the actor get the quote wrong? Well, he's human just like everybody else. He's susceptible to suggestion, to things in pop culture. I mean, you hear the misquote all the time, more often than you hear the actual quote. Well, of course, it's going to be what people remember because they hear it more often.
How does that explain the van in Back to the Future become a Toyota van, though? I mean, there was a Toyota van in this for like a week, and people saw it. Everybody, I mean, dozens of people saw it. I saw it. Everybody that was involved in that thread saw it, and it's bizarre because it went back to the VW van. We all knew it's supposed to be VW van, right? We're watching that scene where Marty.
Yeah, see, and that's that's another movie. I've seen that movie. I don't know how many times, over the years, and I've never seen a Toyota van. It's always been the same.
I didn't either until it happened. I know, that's what we're saying. It's one of the things that stands out to me. When I look at it, I think that's somebody that's technology. That's an outside source. That is explainable. We use Occam's razor to describe things all the time, and if you eliminate everything else, that has to be an external influence. That has to be some kind of thing like what Facebook was doing when they went and used their users as guinea pigs. It has to be something like that. There's companies that do that with technology. One's called Myriad. It places things in films and movies and commercials.
I mean, the government has done it. The government's done it through subliminal messages. They've done it through propaganda. I mean, it's and like you said, nine times out of 10, you don't even realize it's happening. You just it's. And it's almost impossible to be able to tell an memory that's 100% accurate and a memory that's not. It's just because to everybody they're accurate. My memory is accurate. It's got to be accurate because that's what I remember. And it most of the time, a memory is not 100% accurate. Usually, it's just a minor detail that's different. But sometimes it can be a bigger detail.
Yeah. Next question. I believe
last question, right? Yeah.
Yep. Okay. There's one that this is an example that gets mentioned quite a bit in our Facebook group, and it would be the Field of Dreams line, the famous voice. And I want to add, a lot of people seem to remember that the voice said, "If you build it, they will come," which it doesn't. But I want to ask you is, in the context of the film itself and the book from which the film was derived, Shoeless Joe by W.P. Kinsella, how would they even make sense in the context of the plot?
Well,
the community would say, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I never heard that one, but I'll pipe in on this because I am Canadian. I am a published author in Canada. I know Kinsella secondhand. And I've never had that Mandela effect. It's always been, if you build it, he will come.
Right.
The father. I mean, I've never even heard this. I've never even heard that this is one of the...
It's a big one. It's a big one. And because people will, there's a lot of businesses and things have adapted the quote to mean, if you do something, it will bring people to that business. So they use they, and I think it's another case where people hear something more often, so that's what they remember. But but in the context of the film itself, they makes no sense because the whole plot is Ray repairing that fractured relationship with his father, who's been dead for decades.
Well, but then there's the general message of again, multidimensionality or afterlife or whatever you want to say it. And then I got the sense at the end of the book and the movie where there's just the big lineup of cars coming with their headlights on, that is the they that will come.
It is, but then what's the point of the Terrence Mann character? That's the whole point for him being there, to show Ray that these people will come. That is independent of the plot of Ray and his father.
Oh, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Very, very understated role for Darth Vader, folks.
Yeah.
probably two of his most iconic roles.
Yeah.
So I would say that that's pretty much the alternative that would be brought up is people remember the they because it's referring to the not just to the players, which is they, but also the cars at the end. And that's why and people remember it that way. I mean, they do. I mean, it's a big effect. It certainly is. But you do bring up something there, Bruce, that I think is really pertinent. Maybe a good way to turn it over to the roundtable now. We'll let some people raise their hand and then chat and join us if they want to and ask their questions independently. Is this idea of certain actors, certain players, I mean, that's what we call players, show up in the Mandela Effect more than anybody else. You could absolutely call it Tom Hanks Effect. Yes, you could totally call it the Hanks Effect. He has more than anybody, then Carrie, and then we're talking about Darth Vader there. James Earl Jones shows up again and again too. So yeah, and you think of this big mass of how many actors there are, for those two in particular, Hanks and Carrie, to show up the way they do in so many times, and for Carrie to be the one that actually made it first mainstream comment about it on the Bill Maher episode. In Sally Fields has quite a few, or Field, one's her name, Sally Fields. But nothing touches Tom Hanks. So really, Tom Hanks.
No, and I'd like to bring up one interesting thing about Tom Hanks too, and not a lot of people know this. Like with the Forrest Gump quote, the Mama always said life was like a box of chocolates. That scene was actually filmed both ways. And it was filmed the way it is in the film, and it was also filmed from a slightly different camera angle. And this can be found on YouTube, where he says life is like a box of chocolates. And that version was used in either promotional material or a documentary or making of or something. That footage exists. You can find it. It can be difficult to find, but you can find it. So it's, that could just be something, that people have seen, or, and it's, well, that's what he said. But, and on the DVD box cover, it says life is. But there again, there's been countless times where DVD or VHS box art has had errors in it.
Yeah.
So that's just not, it's evidence, but it's not proof. And it's evidence that can be explained in another way.
Well, speaking of explaining the other way, we can have visitors from our chat, our live talk here that are in the chat room now join. Would you put your hand up, and then we'll bring you in. The rules apply the same as they do to the subreddit, so don't keep it PG-13. Don't break any rules. Be treated, because this gets saved as a regular post on Reddit. So you can access this later. The live talk that's going on, the thread that's going on here will stay up. So anything you say here on the live chat will also be a permanent record, basically. So just keep that in mind. And if anyone wants to join us, go ahead. We'll give it a couple minutes for people to. You don't have to. You can just enjoy listening if you want to. But if nobody joins, we'll probably wrap it up shortly. I would like to have some other people represent the community from the community.
I would love to field questions.
He's back.
Okay.
Nice recovery, Kyle. You dropped for a second there.
Oh, did I?
And it does happen. I mean, like I said, I haven't done a live talk yet where I haven't dropped, and it's embarrassing because one time I was going off on some soliloquy for like 10 minutes and came back and it was gone the whole time. So,
but I was saying I'd love to field questions from the group.
Yeah, and this may be our last live talk, people. So this is an experimental program that Reddit launched from July 27th, and it ends October 27th.
Wow.
And I was lucky enough to be selected as one of the moderators to be able to host live talks. And